The catalyst for this video is me being approached to get a discount code for this keyboard from Drunk Deer, who are introducing a rapid trigger function into their keyboards, specifically the Drunk Deer A75. Now the point of this video isn't exactly just to talk about this keyboard, but rather rapid trigger and speed as a whole. But to give my thoughts about the keyboard briefly, I'm going to be coming at this from a player's perspective, as I'm not really some keyboard guy. I'm not out here lubing these switches or some shit like some of you freaks are, okay? This is the state of my Corsair Stray, which I spent 99% of my OSU time on, looks like, and it's the second one. The first one was worse. Real ones know how it is, but that decides the point. Unboxing it, I personally really like the design of it, and it's certainly more clacky and moist than any other keyboard I used. It also comes with a knob, which seems to be a trendy thing to add, as the Sayo keypad also has this. Now in terms of gameplay, I found the drivers to be a bit confusing to use, but other than that, the main issue was that, well, one, I'm extremely washed up, but two, the feeling of the keyboard wasn't really to my liking for gameplay. I don't think this has anything to do with the keyboard being bad, it's just not how I like keyboards. I would describe it as super mushy. However, again, you're hearing this from the guy who would ride or die for the Corsair Strafe, so yeah. Is the keyboard as good as the Wooding? Maybe, probably not. However, it's significantly cheaper, offers a larger size board other than the keypad, which, let's be real, keypads kind of give off the energy of the guy who wears like fanny packs in public. Not that there's anything wrong with that though, but the Sayo keypad rapid trigger feels better for me personally, and it's the keyboard I mained for my brief 1-month comeback. However, it has its share of issues. However, they are relatively minor as long as you calibrate it when things go wrong. But anyways, rapid trigger has created a much different mentality towards speed, and it's not even completely due to just the mechanism itself, but rather a sort of snowball effect per se, about everything about speed as a whole. Now, I'm not going to act like some sort of lore meister from Final Fantasy or some shit, as I've only played those since 2017, but let's take it back a bit. Back in the day, speed gave 0 PP. You could FC maps like Reunion with good accuracy and barely get a high 300, so speed was considered a sort of niche skill set, mainly perceived as cool by people who knew the famous players like Gaze McGee and Kainan. But most players who were good at speed around this time were largely unknown or simply underground. Move forward in time a bit, and now speed is actually worth something. It's important to understand that in this time period up to around 2019 or so, give or take, 300 BPM was considered this kind of mystical thing, like it wasn't perceived to be really possible by most people, and there was pretty much no one who could actually play it besides a few hints here or there by players like Septon, Peach T, and even Cookie Z. But there was never anything actually substantial, mostly bursts and the occasional longer stream with bad accuracy. Then we enter the sort of speed enlightenment era. Players like Zeltol and Zestiny come into the scene and pretty much completely redefine what people thought speed was and could be. No one had ever seen a player like Zeltol ever. In the beginning, he was known, if you were in the know, by his old map #1s with high accuracy. I remember I first noticed him when he got his FC on the Digital Force around mid-2018, which this map has these very awkward 240 patterns in it, but that's besides the point. As time progressed, he would move towards higher BPM old maps such as Snow Goose and Loudness War, and would be able to play these maps that were 300 BPM with such a proficiency it didn't even seem real, really. As again, at this time 300 BPM was this kind of mystical thing. Zestiny, on the other hand, would push more towards the upper echelon of BPMs, going into territories completely unseen, such as anything above 330. And again, it's hard to convey just how monumental these players were towards the perception of speed and what was possible. So players like these inspiring players, speed giving PP now, and a larger awareness of speed as a whole, you start to see a much larger influx of people getting good at speed. And over time, the sort of niche uniqueness factor starts to fade. Players as a whole start becoming better at speed, and maps once perceived as cool FCs go more into a farming category. This brings us to the current era. Quite a large jump of time, but I'm not here to give you some in-depth history lecture or some shit. With speed becoming a widely accepted and practiced skill set, the threshold of what was once considered good goes up dramatically. Players like Z back in the day were considered some of the best, but now a lot of their scores are passé and trivial. However, this does not diminish Z's skill as a player, as skill is relative to a time period. Back then, scores like this were considered the peak of speed, and the overall collective thoughts, perceptions, maps available, and things like that make it so that, say a player from today was teleported back then without the current skill perception they have, if put into that environment and were forced to grind again, but without the modern perception and tools, their skill level would be in the same general league as the general players around that time. That is until a select few individuals are able to, say, play in the future, such as a Zeltol or a Zestiny. So why does any of this matter? Well, really it doesn't. But the point is, players today being whenever you're watching this video, are in a position to get very, very, very good, and can take advantage of many things players in the past were unable to, such as rapid trigger. Now let's not act like this rapid trigger thing is completely new, as prior keyboards were on the same wave, such as the Razer analog keyboard with optical switches that fewer people mentioned they existed years prior. However, widespread and conventional use of these kinds of switches and rapid trigger were not coming to mainstream until recently. And without going on a huge diatribe about it, I'll just keep it simple. Yes, it does make speed easier, or rather, more efficient. The best way I could try to visually describe the way rapid trigger makes speed easier is to observe this play. And this is by no means a slight on the player mentioned. I'm just using this as an example as what you're able to do with rapid trigger, as it's very easily identifiable within their score. Notice how during the intense high BPM from streams, I believe these are around 330-ish, it looks like his hand is not even moving. Having a low actuation of the switch in combination with the rapid trigger allows you to do these kind of movements which you can't really reliably execute on normal keyboards. Less finger movement equals less stamina loss, and generally just makes it easier to move faster as you don't have to go up as high. Now if you take this to the extremes, you can do really goofy shit like single tap 250 ppm by lowering the settings all the way, and just do various things to manipulate tapping and get the speeds unreachable of traditional tapping, like the raking method. Now rake tapping is its own beast in itself, which I happen to have quite a lot of experience with, as for a while I was unintentionally doing it without realizing it. It led to a lot of goofy scores coming into existence. But with things like rapid trigger, doing rake tapping is even easier than it was before and causes its own host of changes towards the perception of tapping. Now without trying to be rude, doing this is essentially the equivalent to being a perma-bulking powerlifter like Kirkle's Grizzlies doing unconventional lifts. Of course, if you really like doing this kind of thing, feel free. Just be aware that there is very minimal glamour behind such things in the long run and getting better at the game. I do think that someone could use such a tapping style to get insane high BPM scores that are actual scores at a high level and not just random passes, but I don't think that's come to fruition yet. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But if you're a 6-digit that thinks they're going to be the new Destiny because they're getting D ranks on a Sogru 330 with the lowest possible settings and think they're really doing something, you are sorely mistaken. Having or not having the rapid trigger isn't really the point. Now of course this sentiment is one that gets thrown around more than monkeys throwing shit, but you should be focusing on trying to get better at the actual game as a whole before caring about these things. If you already have a base of gameplay to work with, then yes, the rapid trigger will be immensely helpful and let you do things you couldn't before way easier with less effort. However, if you still aren't at the arbitrary skill threshold needed for this, it is not unlikely you may fall into a trap of using the rapid trigger's low settings trying to be fast and nuking your accuracy. Either way, realistically I do think you should buy one if it's possible, as it's a significant technological skill evolvement, and as time progresses it'll just be something everyone at the highest level uses, as it is objectively easier to get good at speed with them. But if you're at a lower skill level, I caution you to be aware that you could very easily mess yourself up if you go in and try to crank some shit out. Just use it responsibly, okay? Just copy Emmerich settings. And hey, if you like this video, maybe you should go check out Base Skater. That's some crazy shit in the works. Though if something comes up, I might make more Osu videos on this channel, because I like it, but yeah, that's all I gotta say, baby. Oh yeah.
Listen to this track, bitch!